Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Second Nature Climate Services webinar today. My name is Michelle Medea. I'm Director of Programs and Communications at Second Nature, and we're delighted to have you with us this afternoon. We're using a new webinar platform today because we want to introduce you to our staff, and we hope to help you put faces to names of our experts. Hopefully you can see me in a little box somewhere on your computer, and we also hope that using fewer computers increases our technology success. So there will be a hot seat and our presenters will rotate in and out of this chair. So thank you for your patience, and we're delighted to have you. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. This webinar will be recorded so that you and your colleagues can access it afterwards. We'll send a link around. And we'll save some time at the end for our question and answer session, so please make sure that you ask questions at any time during the webinar using the questions function. The purpose of today's event is to share with you a variety of the resources, tools, and services that Second Nature provides to help campuses achieve their climate action goals. You'll hear from Tim Carter, President of Second Nature, Steve Muzzy, Senior Manager for Climate Programs, Ruby Woodside, Innovative Services Manager, and Will Elmore, Clean Energy Fellow. I'm going to turn it over to Tim right now to frame the conversation and to set the stage for what you'll hear from our team.
Michelle, hi everyone. So we're really excited that you're joining us today. We're going to try to cover a lot of ground, so we'll be succinct here with our different topics. I'm going to try to give you a broad overview of where we are strategically as an organization, and hopefully that can then inform some of the specific content areas we'll cover later. For us, this all goes back to mission. What we do is to accelerate climate action in and through higher education. So when you think about that mission statement, the in work is really the on-campus climate solutions that you've been working on. And then this element of through is actually to think about the complementary strengths that higher education as a sector can bring to the broader challenge that faces us as society that climate presents. So as we've thought about our evolution as an organization and our evolution as a network, we've really been reflecting in the past couple years on what the drivers of a new strategy might look like. And so when we think about this, we can kind of start the modern era of Second Nature as 2006 with the launch of the commitments. And that's represented here by this Genesis phase. We had about a decade of experience looking at these senior leadership commitments that have been largely focused on carbon neutrality in institutions. And as we thought about that over the past couple years, this evolution phase, we've thought, well, what are the main drivers moving us forward, and how might that impact how we support campus activity? And so we kind of identified three main areas. The first is that accelerating performance of campuses who are committed to taking aggressive climate action for us is really more important than running additional campaigns to get more people to sign on. And that's a bit of a shift. When you're in campaign thinking, more is better. And in our case, we want performance to be the focus and what defines us both as a network and as a support organization for the network. Secondly, we identified that campuses can both lead by example, so the in-work of our mission, but then they can also enable other sectors to act on climate. So it's not merely self-serving as a sector, but it's also important to help businesses and cities and states actually accelerate their action, and by doing so, leverage the important strengths that higher ed has for all of society. And then thirdly, in this evolution phase, we see that transformational action and exponential change has to happen in the next 10 years. So we're at a really critical and urgent time frame, and that's what we're calling the climate action imperative phase. So there's a sense of urgency here. We have to act, and so the work that we need to do has to be big and bold and move the needle really quickly. So we're starting this next phase of our strategy with kind of four main areas. First is to create climate services that accelerate your performance. So these services actually will be mainly what we talk about today, a series of support activities from across all of our staff and potentially with other partners that aren't on the webinar today, that help you meet your goals and accelerate performance. Secondly, we really want to look at our support systems, both as a network and as an organization, to make sure we're doing those that support activity and supporting your activity in the most efficient and effective way. And for us, for signatories especially, that largely helps us think about ways in which we can use your data, not just to be something we require of you, but actually something that's really useful in driving the solutions forward. And so Steve's going to take a first cut of talking about that. Thirdly, we're going to continue our leadership on this higher ed cross-sector and subnational climate action. So this is really the work we've done with initiatives like the We Are Still In campaign and America's Pledge, as well as this recent network that we launched called the University Climate Change Coalition. This is all cross-sector activity, and Second Nature's role is to actually bring higher education into this activity. Lastly, we're really focused. We don't want to just do what we always do and be comfortable with that, but we always want to test new opportunities for action. And that's going to be both on the programmatic side and with new institutions. And so these 4 areas are really what anchor our strategy moving forward. The way we do that is really to be somewhat responsive. So we want to help with services that actually we hear back from schools are needed. And so the way we do that is to actually ask you what those goals are. And what you're looking at now are the top areas, climate action areas that were identified at our most recent implementation liaison survey, which is our group of campus representatives who are working on climate action on their campus. So you can see buildings, renewable energy, climate action planning. These are all the top areas of support that you are asking for. So we take this feedback and then we design the support programs to help with these solutions. So it's really important. A lot of times we get survey fatigue, right? But in this case, it really is helpful for us. And we design programs and support systems according to the areas that you tell us. So that's our kind of our reactive services. And then we also have proactive services where we can identify areas of climate need that aren't necessarily on everyone's horizon, but are what we're seeing and hearing in the sector and outside of the sector as areas of need for larger and transformative climate activities. The way we then do that is both with internal staff expertise, but then we also recognize that climate solution providers actually have additional capacity and expertise to help us in those solution areas that we identified. We have a staff of 10, so we're relatively small, and we have a lot of need that you have said you need help with. And so we rely on technical support from both campuses and from the private sector. And we really carefully curate this list. So, you know, it's not, we don't take any strategic partner. We're very thoughtful about the strategic partners we bring into the organization. And they're only here because they meet an expressed campus climate need. So they provide technical assistance to us. You might have seen some webinars that we do with them or in-person meetings we have with these corporate partners like Customer First or Siemens, Fovia, Open Road, or McKinstry. And NG is a more recent partner. We'll be having, I think our next webinar is with NG specifically. They're there to help you meet your goals, and we think they're good companies that can help you do that, but more importantly, they can cover topics that we don't internally have staff expertise to cover. So it's important to recognize the role that I think all of our partners play, but specifically the technical partners on the corporate side. So that's a little bit of background on both strategy and how we get there. How do we improve our climate services? So I'm going to turn it over to Steve Muzzy, who's our Senior Manager of Climate Programs, to talk about the ways in which we're going to make our data, your data, more useful.
Thanks, Tim. Hello, everyone. So as Tim mentioned, I'm going to take a brief 5 minutes here to talk about ways we are making the data collection and sharing process easier for you, as well as the ways we are thinking about the data collection process and turning it around to create resources to help further advance your climate action goals. But first, I want to say it is May 1st. It is reporting day, and I just want to thank all the signatories that have submitted your annual progress evaluation to us, as well as to all the others that have reached out to us to say that you're working on it and you'll be submitting it soon. We really appreciate the time and effort you take to to do the work on your campuses and to share your efforts with us. So we're going to begin with the update to the Climate Action Plan. I've actually been receiving quite a few questions about the update to the Climate Action Plan this last month. And so just a quick reminder, back in 2015 with the rebrand and the expansion of the commitments to include a resilience commitment and then the combination of resilience and carbon to create the climate commitment, we had to think about ways to develop metrics to track progress towards the goals laid out in that commitment. So not only resilience, but it gave us an opportunity to look at some of the carbon data fields that we had in the CAP plan. So this screenshot you're seeing isn't a huge departure for carbon carbon data fields in the Climate Action Plan, but I do just want to highlight that we are now asking signatories to provide a goal that for stationary combustion output and purchased electricity output, and this will help us to better compare progress across the campuses and to more easily identify emission reduction strategies and opportunities for these outputs. And you see that they align with the feedback from the IL survey that Tim just shared around buildings, so your stationary combustion and renewable energy, which would relate to your purchased electricity. So as we move forward through this webinar today, so Will Elmore, our Clean Energy Fellow, will also discuss how his analysis of the data in the reporting platform helped inform his project for large-scale renewable energy procurement capability. So moving through the CAP, just quickly, so this is kind of the biggest piece of it, and just one note, so carbon commitment signatories will be able to see the resilience strategy, this piece of the form, and you can opt in. But for climate commitment and resilience commitment signatories, there is a preset list of resilience strategies underneath the 5 dimensions, as you see here. If you need more, or you don't see a strategy that you are working to increase capacity on, there is an option to add other and fill that in. And then for each of the strategies that you do select, we are asking for you to provide a short, mid, and long-term goal. Again, just quickly going through this, Ruby Woodside, who's coming up next, will share more information and resources on how to incorporate your resilience goals and strategies into the Climate Action Plan. And then quickly, very recently, Temple University actually submitted their updated CAP, and here's an example of the general public, or if you, as a signatory, were going through the reporting platform, this is what you would see. So they provided the 2 carbon reduction goals for one for stationary combustion, one for purchased electricity, and then here's just a small snapshot of some of their resilience strategies and how that would look. So another resource we have for signatories is we are collecting all the Climate Action Plan files that are in the reporting platform, and we're putting them in one place into one spreadsheet that is sortable by state, Carnegie class, and carbon neutrality date. And so this is a direct link to the file download. So this would just make it much quicker and easier for you to compare yourself with peers, or just in general kind of do some research around maybe best practices, or just interested in some strategies that some other signatory in the network may be using to reach their goals. So to access this, you can contact me directly, and I will share it with you, or you can contact reporting at Signatory. We'll get you the link. Forward, too far. Another resource we have recently developed, we're calling this our number cruncher. This is to help perform a very basic greenhouse gas inventory. The advantage of this is it provides you with all the inputs necessary to complete a basic greenhouse gas inventory. It's in one place. It aligns with the inputs that are in SciMap. There's no time constraint in the data collection process, and you can share this form across your campus, so you can work on it together. Once you fill this out, complete it, you submit it to us, Second Nature staff. We'll reach back out to you. We'll set up a call. We can then work with you to set up another account with SciMap, maybe do another basic account with them, and we'll help you walk walk you through to get to the carbon outputs necessary to submit the annual progress evaluation. So again, it's a really basic, it's your scope 1 and 2 and your direct travel, air travel in scope 3. We can get in here, do it pretty quickly, but it will meet that kind of reporting requirement for basic inventory. Again, not for everyone, but could be very useful, especially for those that are kind of new to the greenhouse gas inventory process. So again, contact me or reporting and I'll help you access that. I keep getting it wrong. And then finally, just want to remind folks of our Marks of Distinction program that launched last year. This is the opportunity to get recognition for the progress that you've made related to your climate action work. So there are three categories that we provide marks of distinction in. That's performance, participation, and goals. And we will begin for 2019 reporting period, we will begin the analysis this summer, and then late September, we will issue the next round of marks of distinction. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ruby Woodside.
Great. Thanks, Steve. So, hi, everyone. I'm Ruby Woodside. I'm going to introduce briefly just a few of the resources that we have to help campuses in the resilience planning process. And then if folks want to know more about any of these resources, you can always reach out to me directly. So the tools and resources that I'll introduce today are the Community Resilience Building Workshop Tool, the Campus Evaluation of Resilience Dimensions, the Capacity Assessment Matrices, and also some of our how-to guidance documents. And I know some folks might be familiar with these, but if you are, then this is just a good reminder that they exist. So first of all, the Community Resilience Building Workshop. Essentially, this is a process for how to organize and facilitate a campus community resilience building workshop. This process was developed by the Nature Conservancy, who we've been working closely with over the past couple of years to bring this to campuses. If you go to their website, which is communityresiliencebuilding.com, there is a guidance for how to go through this process. There are some examples from other communities and campuses that have done this process, and other supporting documents that you might need if you're interested in doing this on your campus. It's a very stakeholder-driven planning process, so it really kind of elicits some great ideas from the community members themselves. And it's a very flexible process, which is one of the reasons that we've liked it a lot and found that it's worked well for campuses, because schools can tailor it to their individual situation. And so I usually recommend this for schools that are either in the resilience assessment process of commitment implementation, or also the planning process. As I mentioned, it's pretty flexible and can be helpful during different phases of the process. Oh, how do I go back? Okay, great. So how does the CRB actually work? Essentially, it's a 1 or 2 day workshop. Ideally, you would invite between 20 to 40 key stakeholders from both the campus and the community. And what happens during the workshop is that in small groups, the participants will fill out this risk matrix. So they'll identify the key climate hazards that are impacting the campus and community. They'll identify some features that are both strengths and potentially vulnerabilities in the area. And then the participants will come up with some actions to take. And then at the end of the workshop, they'll prioritize which actions are the most urgent and the most kind of time sensitive. So at the end of this process, what you'll have is a list of very clearly defined actions that can be taken to increase campus and community resilience to climate change. And one of the advantages, I think, is that it's very, because it's a stakeholder-driven process, it's very bottom-up. And so the actions are developed by the community members themselves. And so there's a lot of built-in support and buy-in already. So these are just a few photos from campuses that have used this process. We've tested this in a number of different campuses, and the examples are on our website if you want to see what other schools have done. And I also want to mention that some of the services that Second Nature offers, if you're interested in doing a community resilience building workshop, so we do offer train the trainers. So we'll train folks in how to actually facilitate one of these workshops themselves. As I mentioned, we have many examples online, and we have some guidance for how schools can do this and how it fits in within the commitment context. And also in some cases, we're able to do the workshop, like the actual workshop facilitation. So I've gone to some schools and facilitated the workshop. In that case, we'll usually need our travel covered. But if you have any questions about this, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. Okay. So the next tool that I'm going to introduce is the Campus Evaluation of Resilience Dimensions. So this is a survey that walks campuses and communities through the process of just assessing resilience in each of the 5 dimensions. So we talk about resilience in these 5 dimensions of economic, infrastructure, social equity and governance, health and wellness, and ecosystem services. So within each of these dimensions, the survey has a number of indicators, and it provides an opportunity to rate the indicator on a scale of 1 through 5 from essentially kind of weaker to stronger. This tool was developed by Second Nature working with a Vermont-based organization called the Community Resilience Organization. And I usually recommend it for schools that are in the earlier phases of the resilience journey, so that are trying to complete the resilience assessment. So how does this actually work? There are 2 options. There's an online version and a PDF version. The PDF version is pretty straightforward. The online version of this survey actually has an opportunity for campuses to create a unique URL. So for example, a sustainability director could create a unique URL to complete this survey, and then send it out to folks that you wish to complete the survey, and then collect it all in a single email. Because of the online capabilities, this can be a really great way to collect information from a very large group of participants from both the campus and possibly community members as well. One of the advantages also is that because it has this 1 through 5 scale, and there's some descriptions of what each value might look like, then it does provide some general definitions of resilience, which can be helpful to schools that are just getting started in this process. And it is subjective, but it can be helpful to understand some of the community perceptions of strengths and vulnerabilities, and kind of help identify which areas to focus on. So if you complete this online survey, what you'll have at the end of it is you'll have these results that kind of show the average rating per indicator in each of the dimensions. So as I mentioned, this can be really helpful just to prioritize areas from the community's perspective that need work in terms of building resilience. Because it's a survey, you could also use it to track progress over time, which is an interesting feature. So the next tool that I'll introduce just very briefly are the capacity assessment matrices. So these are Excel templates that you can download from our website. They were developed by our 2 Crux Fellows last year from Arizona State University and Portland State University. These are most helpful, I think, during the resilience assessment process, and I usually recommend them for larger institutions, although smaller institutions could also use them as well. So essentially what we have, there's 2 slightly different versions, one from Arizona State University, one from Portland State University, and we also have some completed examples so you can see what other schools have done and how they've used this. But basically they walk schools through the process of identifying indicators, and what I do like about these is that it kind of really helps define different planning areas on campus, and it also helps identify who's responsible for implementing different planning areas, and so that can be helpful to organize and kind of assess when there are cases where there might be many different resilience initiatives that are happening across campus. It's helpful to kind of understand, everything that's happening in the landscape. So then the last thing I just wanted to remind folks about are these how-to guidance documents. So we have 2 documents that really walk folks through the kind of 2 main steps of the resilience assessment, which are the the resilience commitment, which are the campus community resilience assessment, and then incorporating resilience into the climate action plan. And these are in the form of Google Docs because we do update them pretty frequently. So the first one is the how to complete a campus community resilience assessment. This walks through all of the key steps that will need to be completed to do a resilience assessment. It also links to many tools and resources beyond the ones that I just mentioned that can be used. And, as I said, these are Google Docs because they're really living documents. And so pretty frequently we'll update them and add information and add resources. So I do really encourage folks to use these. And then there is a how to incorporate resilience into a climate action plan, which essentially walks through the process of completing the resilience portion of the climate action plan. So Steve showed briefly the kind of the resilience strategy section. So this document goes through the process of selecting strategies, goal setting, and determining metrics within each of the strategies, and then completing the climate action plan report. Oh, okay. So any questions, folks can email me directly. So with that, I will give it back to Michelle.
Thanks, Ruby. So I just wanted to take a minute and introduce Will Elmore. He is not a full-time staff like the others are that you have met. One of the initiatives that we've been most excited about this past year was we were the recipient of a grant through the Ray C. Anderson Foundation's Next Gen Committee to support scaled renewable energy at campuses. This work is happening in 2 phases. There will be direct financial support for a group of campuses to cover the upfront costs of getting aggregation projects off the ground. So this is, real money to help campuses achieve some of these goals. And then the grant also supported hiring Will Elmore, who's a Clean Energy Fellow. And he spent these past few months working specifically on renewable energy tools and primers, and he is going to talk about those now.
Thanks, Michelle. So my fellowship has really been about increasing and enhancing Second Nature's ability to speak intelligently and support you as you proceed along your renewable energy procurement journey. And this is played out in 2 primary categories. The first is directly supporting signatories that have already begun their journey. And the second, which we'll talk mostly about today, is the creation of this library of resources to support you on your renewable energy procurement journey, no matter which stage you're in. And at the end of the day, of course, this is all about helping you, lowering the boundaries to reducing your carbon footprint. And so when we talk about large-scale renewable energy, we think about it as a very valuable tool to reduce your carbon footprint because it allows you to address both scope 1 and 2 emissions, which within higher ed specifically creates about 75% of total footprints on average. But there are other benefits to large-scale renewable energy procurement as well. As we've seen over the past decade or so, solar and wind technology prices decreasing. We've also seen an increase in the volume of power purchase agreements or PPAs. And this is because these PPAs are financially accretive. They save organizations overall electricity spend. And in the context of higher ed, there are additional valuable elements to renewable energy procurement. Most renewable energy developers are more than happy to get you involved in analyzing the data from their projects to support research. It allows you to engage your stakeholders from across your community, and as well as if you're thinking about forming a larger aggregation to sign a power purchase agreement, it gives you the opportunity to connect with peer institutions in your region. So I mentioned this path to renewable energy procurement, and this is a little bit of a misnomer because everybody has a little bit of a different journey. But to think, to be able to create a library of resources that supports all signatories, all institutions, we have to paint this journey in very broad, generalized strokes. So the first step of this journey is simply curiosity, and hopefully everybody on this webinar is, at least at this stage, interested in learning more about renewable energy. After doing some preliminary research and getting a kind of a general idea of where your organization might be headed, of course it's important to build support within your organization. And then from there, we often see organizations seek the support of renewable energy consultants or advisors, which work with renewable energy procurement contracts and bidding processes on a daily basis and really drive value through experience and industry knowledge. And so the whole idea of the resources that we're going to talk about in a moment is to compress the journey from a curiosity to signing a contract, both in terms of time and the hassle that is involved. So to this point, we have a set of 7 resources that we've developed. The first type of resource are primers. So right now we have a primer focused on better understanding and analyzing your electric bill, getting an idea of what's going on with wholesale electricity and PPA prices. And then because the renewable energy policy landscape is so fragmented, we have a primer focused on pointing you in the directions that will help you figure out what type of renewable energy procurement is actually possible to you. We have more primers under development, such as some of the qualitative elements involved in forming a successful renewable energy aggregation. And we'd love to hear from you what type of primer would be valuable to your journey. We have a set of 2 spreadsheet tools as well. And these tools the first tool focuses on helping you understand what's going on with your electricity load. So when you use a lot of electricity and when you don't use so much electricity in a given day, over the course of a month, different times of year. And then we have a basic economics model for a renewable energy deal that will help you speak intelligently and speak in the language of the finance folks that you will surely be working with in this journey. And then finally, for later in the journey, we have a couple of templates specifically focused on contracts. First, a template for a renewable energy advisor request for proposal, and then also a template for a power purchase agreement term sheet. And these are really focused on, cutting through the legal jargon and helping you understand what these contracts actually mean. So we're going to take a look at 2 of these resources with the general idea that will help you get acquainted with the structure of these resources, and then we'll leave it to you to dig into the content. So first, we'll look at the Understanding Electric Bills primer. And we realize these primers can be can have very dense content, and they can be difficult to understand. So that's why we started each primer with a section that focuses on why this matters. And this will help you become centered and look for key takeaways as you proceed through the primer. And next we have the meat of the primer, which is the bulk of the informational content. In this case, we see a little bit of information about charges on your electric bill that vary with the amount of electricity you consume as compared to your power demand and other fees that might be charged at a flat rate. And this content, again, can be very dense, so we've tried to provide additional resources. In the case of this primer, we have a sample electric bill that you can use to follow along and actively learn as you work through the primer. In other instances, we have links to external websites that will provide more information as you learn more about renewable energy procurement. And then at the end of each primer, we have a few words of wisdom that are very practically focused on the immediate next steps and application of the information from the primer into your journey. So next we'll look at the large-scale renewable energy procurement economic model. And apart from being in a spreadsheet format, we've tried to keep the structure of these Excel resources fairly consistent in the sense that there's a lot of information to digest in these, so we try to start off with a section about why this resource actually matters to you. Then we jump into the instructions, which generally help you understand what's going on in the tool, help you use it intelligently, and will contain some important information as well. You can see in the last line here, we have some insight about degradation rates. Wind farms generally continue to produce about the same amount of electricity on a year-to-year basis, whereas kind of the industry standard is that solar farm production decreases by about 0.5% per year. That's perfect.
Okay.
And then it can be a little bit scary, but the Excel tools require some input from you. Essentially, you have to add information from your specific context to make these things really powerful, and that's what you see in the light yellow boxes here. But if this is a little scary for you, don't worry. We've pre-populated these tools with illustrative information, which will help you get an idea of what's going on, whether or not you're ready to provide data from your specific context. And then finally, we have the results. The top section here, you can see the annual calculations and cash flows that you can leave for your finance team to digest. And at the bottom, we have really the information that matters most, a summary of the economic results that will give you an idea of what to expect from any of these types of deals. So that's the structure of both the primers and the Excel tools. A brief note on the templates. Again, these are focused on contracts, which can be very mundane, but the hope here is that the information that we provide to you and the plain language explanations will help you cut through this mundane legal languages and really understand what these contracts mean. Because it's very important that these contracts are executed in the correct manner, because they ultimately will determine the success of your renewable energy procurement journey. One bonus resource that is not included in the 7 that I mentioned, but was alluded to by a few of my colleagues, is how we're able to leverage the Signatory network here, specifically the reporting data. To this point, we've been able to use the reporting data, the reporting platform data, to help some signatories that are interested in forming a renewable energy procurement aggregation to identify some of their peers that might be suited for this aggregation. And so what this means specifically is that we download the relevant data from the reporting platform, which is scope 1 and 2 emissions, goals, that sort of thing. The valuable information that you provide to us. And then we do some analysis around how these schools are doing in terms of meeting their targets, whether the action that these schools have taken to this point determines whether an aggregation would help them reduce their overall electric bill, and that sort of thing. And then we're able to categorize our conclusions into kind of 3 categories. First, whether an institution would be a good regional fit, whether an aggregation would help them achieve their climate and carbon targets, and finally, whether it would bring economic benefit to them. So this is an example of an output from an actual analysis that we ran for a group of Virginia schools that are looking into renewable energy procurement aggregation. And as you can see, there are a number of schools that fit the bill across these 3 categories, and there are some that don't fit into any of these categories, probably because they're well down the path of renewable energy procurement. And then there are many schools in between. So this type of analysis, I imagine, can be valuable to many of you. So we hope to get engaged with you to work with the reporting platform data. However, it's important to remember this is really a quantitative exercise, and there are qualitative elements to forming an aggregation too, namely whether or not your peer institutions are ready to continue down this renewable energy procurement journey with you. So in terms of accessing resources, you can reach out to me at the email address here, and as well as support@secondnature.org. For a lot of these resources, you can reach out to us, and then we'll provide you with a link and a password to access these resources. With respect to the data analysis processes, you can reach out to me directly, and we can get to work on that. With that, I'll hand it back to Michelle.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
So I just want to remind everybody to please submit some questions through the Q&A system. We have a couple in, but we welcome some more. And as Will referenced, most of the resources that he just listed are, in fact, already posted on the website. The contracts are not yet available, but they will be soon. So any signatory institution that is interested in downloading and using these primers and the Excel documents, please email support@secondnature, and we'll send you the password and the link to the password protected page. So before taking your questions, we wanted to introduce, now that you've seen all of our faces, we wanted to introduce Second Nature office hours. So we are making ourselves available every Thursday from 3 to 5 p.m. We have a dedicated line, and we encourage signatory institutions to give us a call. If you visit that website, I'm not going to click on it now because it would take me to a whole new window, but we have more information on our office hours page, and you can contact folks directly. You'll be able to schedule a 30-minute meeting with us to talk about any number of topics that the team covers. But this is just, you can reach out about reporting or renewable energy or carbon offsets or resilience, or just chat generally about the state of climate action, higher education, motivate, inspire, support each other. So we're happy to have this phone line available for you. So with that, we're going to turn it over to a few questions, and I'll have to call the team back as appropriate. And Ruby, I think the first ones are for you, resilience questions. So we're going with the flow here. So somebody on the line is hoping to begin a discussion about sustainability in their community college. So are the survey and the tools that you provided around resilience scalable for and applicable to a community college?
Yes. Okay, absolutely.
Okay, that's a good yes or no. And then we'll post this presentation again, but can you say another word or two about the Nature Conservancy Resilience Builder workshops, if folks were interested in those?
Sure. Was there a specific question about it?
Just, I think, wanted to know a bit more about doing those.
Yeah, so I would say probably
the website in particular.
The Community Resilience Building website. Mm-hmm. So the Community Resilience Building website is managed by the Nature Conservancy, and so that's where they keep all of the examples from municipalities that have used this process. Originally, it was primarily used by municipalities, and then the past couple of years, we've been working with them to bring it to the campus context. So most of the campus examples are on our website or on our reporting platform, and I can help direct you to the campus examples. But I would say also on the website are, for example, some guidance about how to identify stakeholders and who you should think about in terms of who to participate or who to invite to participate in the workshop. There are some kind of sample emails that include language for what you might include in the invitation. So there are some just kind of general helpful documents for how to organize one of these workshops. And then if you're interested more specifically in how campuses have used this, I would say reach out and I can connect with schools that have done this in the past, or just kind of talk through the process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Will?
All right.
So there's a question about the resources that you shared, and what campus unit, where do these projects begin on campus? Who begins to implement these large-scale renewable energy projects?
That's a great question, and I think that gets to kind of what I mentioned earlier, that everybody's renewable energy procurement journey can be different. Oftentimes it's driven. Students tend to be very passionate about this sort of thing, but sometimes it could be driven from top down within the organization. So it really depends on your specific context and who's willing and ready to be a champion for renewable energy.
Here's a more specific question.
Sure.
As a university in New York, we struggle with state rules regarding credits from PPAs. We need to have a sufficient bill from the national grid to consume the credits. That makes it difficult to expand our portfolio of renewables through PPAs and remote net metering. Is this a common problem across the country or just a result of New York State deregulation?
I think, more generally, the fragmented regulatory landscape and policy landscape leaves institutions in this type of situation. I think that's similar case in New York. And on top of that, the policy landscape's always changing as well. And I think that's the type of reason that campuses would engage with a consultant or an advisor, because they work within that policy landscape on a daily basis. They may have more experience in your specific state or even local community as well.
And where should attendees sort of begin? Given what you have talked about, where's a good starting place?
Sure. Again, it depends on where you are within your journey, but in general, within the resource website, we'll try to list the resources from most basic to most advanced. So if in doubt, you can start from the top.
Okay. Steve, thanks, Will.
All right.
So thanks for the update, and it was nice to see the application of the data that schools submit through the reporting platform to execution through these new projects, like Will demonstrated with the most recent example. What happens if a campus's revised climate action plan is submitted after the deadline? Is that still okay? Which is today.
Yes. So I've been communicating with signatories that the priority for the basic requirement for actively participating in the commitments is that you have your annual progress evaluation in by today, and that for the CAP update, it's more important that the process is in place so that you have all the right folks on your campus involved and understanding of the strategies that you want to really integrate into the fabric of the institution. So basically, as long as that takes, you can submit it. The only impact that may have in regard to some of it would be in regard to the marks of distinction, where some of the goal setting is tied to the goals you submit to your climate action plan. So that may be the only slight impact of not getting it in sooner than later. But again, the process is much more important than just submitting the capitals.
Great. Please do submit questions, anybody, if you have some. And I had a question about the office hours. The office hours opportunity is indeed limited to signatories in the Climate Leadership Network. We'll be scheduling those calls in half an hour time. Regular line or other email accounts, so please don't hesitate to reach out other ways. But this office hours is just really intended to allow you and our team to go deeper on any particular issue and just have a little bit more of an in-depth conversation. So that's the intent of the office hours. Do you want to add anything to that, Tim?
Well, you can also, if you're not a signatory,
you got to come to the hot seat.
If you're not a signatory, you can also just reach out and we can engage in more of a structured relationship prior to having those calls. It's more for existing campuses. You have a place to come anytime.
So those are all of the questions that have come in. And does anybody have anything else that they want to say? Tim, do you have any other comments?
Well, the only thing I was going to say is we have laid out ideas that are largely climate services. So if you think about that as a category of activity and you're not someone who gets regular communications from us, And that would probably mean that you're not a signatory campus. You might be left with the question of, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to engage with second nature? And I would just say, we want to have a suite of climate services that can benefit any institution that really wants to take aggressive climate action. The relationship will look different than it does with signatories, but it is important that we don't want to not serve other campuses who also are serious about taking climate action. That's our mission, and that's what we're committed to doing. And hopefully over the next few months, and even over the course of the next few years, you'll be able, as a non-signatory institution, to also have access to those services in ways that right now signatories are the primary benefits of.
And I would just note too that with the exception of Will's resources that are, password protected, we have a number of resources through the resource library that you can access on our homepage that are freely available to anybody, because that, as Tim said, the goal is to advance climate action at education institutions across the country. So
as of now.
So many of those resources will still be freely available, but we encourage you to take a look in the resource library and see what's there.
Yeah, we're thankful for all your support that you give us, and for all the action that you take, and all the leadership you've shown.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, we should all bring everybody back in. This is the first time. There's feedback on whether the live show is something we should do again.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah.